Welcome to A Pint with Seaniebee, coming to you again from London. I have a great guest today, someone I'm really looking forward to talking to. She's a legend of the UK media and advertising scene. Well, she's crinkling her nose here when I say that, but she recently won a very prestigious prize, which is the Macintosh Medal, given to very few people for personal and public service to the advertising business. She has a very, very full career. She worked in media agencies, TV companies, and in her mid-50s, we'll talk about ageism, she set up Thinkbox, which is an advocacy body for commercial television in the UK. Welcome to the podcast, Tess Alps. How are you?
I'm great, Sean. Thank you for inviting me.
We talked about Tess's name before I pressed record, but it is a very cool name.
It's a brilliant name. There are no other Tess Alps in the world, as far as I can see.
Yeah. I find finding on Facebook would be easy and things like that.
People say, because obviously I'm quite a feminist, but it is my husband's name. But I have been married 43 years, and back then it would have been strange to not take your husband's name. But I was called Tessa Boot. So taking Alps was a no-brainer, really.
Tessa Alps Boot. Tessa Boot Alps. No,
I don't think
Tessa
so.
Alps. Feminism, let's start there. I'm a feminist. And, it's very funny watching men slightly find it difficult to say they're a feminist, which is weird.
It is a shame, isn't it?
Where is it going? Are we happy? Are we finding places?
It's taking longer than we'd all like, but it's generational. It's so deeply cultural that I think expecting a quick fix is probably absurd. I do see progress. I've got a son of 24 and his mates, I don't think it would ever occur to them to not think of women as being equals and to not objectify them. Although having said that, last year the industry launched something called Time 2, which is a sort of movement against sexual harassment in the UK. Before we launched it, we did a massive survey across the industry, and it was still depressing to see that there was a lot of sexual harassment still for young people, young women mainly, but still some young men too. And some of the young women told us how in schools they were treated appallingly, driven by the sort of easy availability of online pornography. Yeah. So I say young men, but maybe there are groups of young men who are learning to disrespect women for all sorts of other reasons. So anyway, just got to keep going.
The advertising business, of course, Mad Men, etc., renowned for pretty appalling treatment of women back through the ages. And still, when I was working in New York in the 2008 or so, it was they wade in and they're very kind of, you got to be careful. But you always feel they're only doing because they have to for legal reasons and not for a bona fide reasons. The bosses I've had in advertising, the best ones by and large have been women, because it's a kind of a dick measuring competition with a lot of the men. And
I try not to make men the enemy, because they're mostly not, and they mostly want to be helpful. And I think we also have to be forgiving, because it's very easy to jump down the throats of people and alienate them, alienate blokes who don't want to be seen as the enemy because they don't think they're the enemy in their head. So it is just a constant cultural change, and everything we could do. I am very lucky to sit on the council of the Advertising Standards Authority, and so you might be aware that they launched an anti-gender stereotyping project last year, and it will come into force this June. So that's an interesting thing. So what you don't want is for advertising itself to be part of the problem. You look back on ads, it's just horrendous.
Or the woman draped on the car.
Yeah. Or only the woman clearing up after a family of useless males, and then the woman runs around dishing up dinner and doing the washing up. So we'll see if that has any...
What was your view on the recent Gillette? I used to work on Gillette. I was the global strategist on that, not for this ad, but I was killed trying to tell them to stop. I called them, in an article I wrote when it came out, the most benignly misogynistic advertiser of that size in history, because women's role was to stroke the smooth man's cheek with the back of their hand and swoon at him. Yeah. And then they bring this thing out, which I liked because it was taking a stand, and they were finally standing for something instead of overpriced razors.
I'm much happy that they tried to do it, and I just hope that it isn't just an advertising thing, that it's a cultural company thing.
No, they're back to stroking hands and faces.
Well, we'll see, because that makes it very shallow and not very convincing, I think. So you have to follow through in the positive sense of that phrase, rather than... It's just work in progress.
Were you surprised at the backlash to the Gillette ad from men?
I was, and I was surprised that they were so vocal, publicly vocal. I thought some of them might feel that, but not say anything. But the fact they felt it was okay to say, this is a load of rubbish, seemed extraordinarily rash.
In my article, I said in my view, there's no man who could ever possibly have a problem with an ad like that. A man who respects women, who supports Me Too, who supports feminism. And so what it did was it squeezed out a lot of the kind of, I got into a bit of trouble for calling them incels. I was only joking, but this kind of, this toxic masculinity.
There's a latent toxic that's there, lurking.
Anyone who wants to follow Piers Morgan, I'm kind of going, whatever.
Weird.
How does a Tess Alps turn into what you are today? I talk a little bit about background and where you came from. And where were you born?
Oh my God. Well, I was born in Nottinghamshire of a bloke who'd been a miner's son, and my mother from Kilkenny in Ireland. She was a nurse.
Do you go back to Kilkenny much?
I do go to Kilkenny, and I see my lovely Irish family, who I adore. And my Irishness is a very strong part of me, and not just as a sort of Brexit sanctuary potential. No, I just feel culturally very close to it. I read English at university, so obviously Irish literature is stupendous. So why would you not want to claim you're good at the words?
We say in Ireland, Kilkenny is the best. So most of the best cities or places to visit in Ireland are on the coast all around the country.
That's one of the few. It's true.
Kilkenny gets a pass.
It's a cracking city, isn't it? The fabulous art scene going on, actually, the handcraft scene, and
So was it a working class background you had?
Working class background. Both parents worked in a psychiatric hospital, so I was the first in my family to go to university. Benefited from the post-war welfare state. Born in 1953. I'm quite happy to admit that.
Yeah.
Baby boomer, had a pretty idyllic childhood in Nottinghamshire in the countryside near Sherwood Forest. Went to Durham University, read English, and then after that I joined a theatre and education group touring around the northeast, performing plays to miners' centres or community centres or schools. And I got married in that time. Rashly decided to go and train to be an actress properly, and got myself into a London theatre school, which killed all desire to be on the stage. I find it so utterly cynical and heartless. It was all about the West End and commercial roles, and I'd been doing restoration comedy in concert to loads of miners, and they loved it. And
so that was, what was that, mid-70s, miner strikes, all that stuff going on?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got it out of your system.
I definitely got it out of my system. I really didn't want to do that. And I just absolutely by accident ended up doing a temporary job in the accounts department of ATV, an ITV company for the Midlands. And I really disapproved of advertising back then, bit of a left-wing rebel. But, lack of knowing what else to do. And it became quite interesting and quite well paid. 10 years later, I found I was still doing it. And suddenly I saw an ad. I mean, this is genuinely the truth. For The Guardian, exactly. The amazing John Webster ad, Points of View. Well. I mean, truly, even I see it today and I get goosebumps. And I think they could run it today with just a bit of different typeface.
That's an issue I've always had. Why do you throw away ads?
Just a brilliant ad like that.
So the ad she's talking about is called Points of View. It's a black and white ad featuring a skinhead charging a businessman. You look like he's about to kick the shit out of him. And it shows it from different angles. And actually, there's a link to it on the blurb of the podcast, so I won't spoil it. It's actually worth not revealing what happens in it. You talked about the fact that you cried when you saw that ad. I was last week with my girlfriend in Dublin, who's a bit younger than me, and I was interviewing Theo, the person you know, and he had worked with Tony Kaye, the famous director, and he has a reel, there's a YouTube reel of all his ads. And I was looking at them, and I started crying as well. She said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Look at these." And she was crying, "No, they're brilliant." I said, "They were on during News at 10. They were on ad breaks. They were proper, the coal fires ad for Friends and the Relaxez-vous for British Rail. Yeah. So there was it, and
huge investment in their creativity.
Yeah, BBH were the kind of darlings at the time of advertising. And when you said you didn't approve of advertising from a socialist point of view or whatever when you were younger, I have an ethical issue with it in terms of I have no problem with Guardian ads or stuff like that, but I do have a problem with the Gillette situation a little bit, and I do have a problem with some of the ethics behind some of those big advertisers that we referenced earlier. As it was very easy to get on my high horse after 27 years in the business, coming out with a reasonably large paycheck. But the other problem I had was just this research-driven sink into mundanity and lack of creativity and acne wallpaper.
What's gone wrong, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, we've all reached our own accommodation with the sort of moral and ethical side of advertising, I suppose. And what The Guardian ad did for me was to show me that advertising was just a means of communication. What you communicated was up to you, so like you can have good books and you can have evil books, but it doesn't mean books are bad.
Correct.
And I feel that's about advertising. Yeah. So The Guardian ad said, God, well, it's not just for global soft drinks. It is for something that I care about. And also, there was something about 30 seconds of dramatising a rather complex concept, which is the Scott Trust, which is about impartial reporting and the truth and seeing things from all angles. Yeah. That was quite complicated if you had to write it out. But in 30 seconds of drama, they made it utterly clear to me and very emotional, and I cared. I didn't just know about it, I cared about it. So I felt there's no reason why advertising can't be used to do all sorts of good things, as well as things that, we all need washing powder and we all need cheese.
So that's a great analogy. I mean, around the time of The Guardian, the Independent launched with that great "It Is Are You," which was lovely as well. Again, a complex message, position.
The distillation of that idea, which is what advertising can do at its very best, is a real art, a proper art that the British are still bloody good at, and the Irish, obviously. British Isles.
The Irish advertising wasn't that great. For some reason, I always thought because of our abilities in writing and comedy and music that we would have a far better advertising setup in Ireland, except we were very much under the shadow of the British.
Do you think that's what? Really?
Like that, yeah.
Maybe.
But you just mentioned the washing powders. Okay, so they were coming out at the same time with these, and still are, with this inane, 10 out of 10 for dads, treating housewives and women like a kind of zero respect, zero entertainment. I mean, Purcell had a couple of things here and there, and some people tried some nice
did work. Some reasonable Purcell work over the last decade, I suppose. The whole dirt is good strategy was quite an interesting insight into making parents love their kids getting muddy, and that was perhaps a better strategy than execution. Really? But people often say, what's happened to advertising? Why isn't it as brilliant as it was? And we try and analyse this, because there is something that we would call the golden age syndrome, which is when you look back, you remember 2 brilliant ads from 1975 and 2 brilliant ads from 1983, 20, 30, 40 brilliant ads, but actually they came over a very long period of time. And last year you'd say there was a brilliant Nike ad, there was a brilliant Audi ad, we're still producing some brilliant ads. But there are some things that have changed, I think, in ad creativity. And one of those influences is undoubtedly globalization. Mostly not a great thing for advertising. We have less dialogue in ads than we used to have. And we don't have jingles so much or catchphrases. So that makes it a bit less powerful, I think. And generally then you've got to produce something that is acceptable in Japan, it's acceptable in Argentina as well as in Dublin.
I mean, research to me is, link testing approach to advertising is going to take away the different... I mean, my view on advertising is you work out what you should be, what everyone says you should be doing, you don't do that. So when I mentioned to you earlier, I worked in brain juice. John Kieran used to say, after all his years in research, he believes you just need to be famous and available. How do you make yourself distinct? Well, if all car ads are showing a car splashing in puddles down a mountain, you don't do that. No. You do something that stands out. Just before we leave your acting thing, was that your first encounter with sexism?
I suppose so. I mean, because I went to a girls-only school, it didn't hit me how differently girls and boys were treated back then, because I only saw how girls were treated, and we were all encouraged to be scientists and maths. Maybe if I'd gone to a mixed gender school, I'd have seen it more. Yeah, so I didn't feel it back then to perform. Your parents very
behind whatever you wanted to do?
Yeah, they just thought... My sister's 10 years older than me, so I was a sort of late surprise, and basically I could do anything. They didn't say, don't go into try and act, because that's not a career. They said, if you want to do it, do it. They were fantastic.
So ATV, did it light a fire then for you a little bit in terms of you liked it, or?
I was not at ATV by the time I liked it. I was at TSW, or Television Southwest. Yeah, suddenly I realised advertising was a worthwhile thing, and so I made sure I learnt about it, got to know a bit more about planning, and I also decided, I don't know what age I would have been in my early 30s, that I wanted to, if I was going to be in it, I'd quite like to be in charge. Does that sound horrendous?
Complex was
well, it does sound horrendous, doesn't it?
I know what you mean.
But I thought, well,
you can change things if you're...
Well, exactly. This is my great thing, that women often do run away from power, because it sounds megalomaniac. But I always say, it's much worse to be powerless, to see things that you can't change. Whereas if you get in a position of some authority, you at least can do your best to make it better.
But then you have things like Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In, which polarised a lot of feminists because it was there was something on the nose about her message, I thought.
I'm not massively into sort of catch. Well, yeah. I don't think anybody should lean in that much into their work. If I'm
Another
honest.
issue. We get back to the list.
I think we should all have.
Right. Yeah, especially.
I hate the phrase work-life balance, because I think work is part of life, but you do need a homework balance. Yeah. And I have at least as exciting a time when I'm not at work.
Yeah.
And I think
everybody, you come up with more ideas when you're. Rather than
me and my garden. I'm a massive gardener. My cabbage patch is the most fertile.
Gardening and opera, apparently. That's what Twitter says. I befriended you today and you friended me back.
Yep, I did.
You went to PhD, which was...
Yes, so I decided I wanted to be an ITV sales director. Did that to discover my ambition. And then when I was there, I realised it was pretty boring.
Yeah.
And so I decided to change my life completely and went over to a media agency.
And that company, PhD, was kind of ahead of its time, because
it
was the first one that was bringing planning sort of to the fore.
It was amazing. It was about the same time that Zenith was set up, which was all about bulk and volume and strength. And PhD was in the exact opposite, which was all about planning-led media. And that appealed to me massively. They were already my great mates, P, H and D, who I shall be seeing next week.
Right.
And... I mean, people said I was bonkers because I was giving up an ITV sales director job, which was, bloody Masters of the Universe nonsense, to go and join a little startup, massive cut in salary, might fold. But I like to change things about a bit.
You only have one time around.
Yeah, and you think, I'm going to do that.
My one was always, if the job kind of scared me, I'd take it.
Yeah. So what's your scariest job that you ever took?
Leaving Ireland, probably. So I had become I was a director early in an agency called CDP when I was about 21. That was probably about 1990. And I quickly realised after 6 years, okay, I could see very quickly 20 years just disappear and suddenly be 46 or 50. Probably with lots of money on a 2.4 engine car.
This is the trouble. The velvet rut.
Yeah. And so I kind of said, I've got to shake out of Dublin or Ireland, and I ended up going to Singapore. And this was nervous for me. I was 27 and I was throwing all this away and throwing away direction. And it was the best thing I ever did. I also said I'd go for a year or two. I was 22 years away. I've only recently come back. I guess I say that the people, it's like the old book, the people you see, the places you go. I ended up going to China to work and Thailand to work and Australia, where I fell in love and got a passport. So my whole life changed by taking that leap. I think it's important. And again, it comes up an awful lot in these podcasts where people, particularly at a young age, have rebelled, done something different. That moment where people go, "Are you mad? You have it made," or whatever. And that was probably.
I think that I did that the other way around. I think I got braver as I got older. Funny enough. So
you kept your love of television. Where did your love of television? Were you a big TV watcher when you were a kid and all that? I mean, it's
absolutely. One of my great jokes is that I was born in November 1953 because I was prepared to be born because my parents had just bought a television set for the coronation in 1953. Amazing. I have never lived in a home without a television set. Yeah. I mean, these days we wouldn't define TV as the television set. It's the content that you watch. But TV is whatever Homer Simpson says. I can't remember. Lover, mother, teacher, whatever.
It's opium of the masses.
If you were a working class girl The first political debate I ever watched was on a TV set. The first opera I ever watched was on a TV set. My first crush was on Dr. Kildare. I mean, it brought the world to me.
I had a little small black and white put in my bedroom because I had a ZX81 computer. And I think my parents thought that might get me into computers, which it didn't. But I was able to use the rabbit ears to get RT1 and 2 when I was supposed to be asleep. And in black and white, I'd watch Monty Python and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it was.
But it was just
first colour arrived.
Oh, but it was so exciting, and you felt you were in touch with what you feel. I lived in a little village in the back of Beyond. It was a sort of contact to the world, but it was also performing as a scripts, dramas, fantastic Wednesday night plays, Kathy Gamo and all that. I'm still an absolute TV and film. I love cinema very much, and I'm lucky as a member of BAFTA. I have to get to watch them all and
How do you
vote.
become a member of BAFTA?
Oh, you slip somebody a few quid.
I bet it was those miners' plays that you were doing. Someone said, "Wait a second."
For a very long time. When I was actually PhD, I was what they call the acceptable face of advertising to the TV industry. Yeah. I sat on the board of the Edinburgh TV Festival, so I'm one of those sort of bridge people, and I'm not very good at either TV or advertising, but I allow them to talk to each other.
Let's go into what's happened, because the digital revolution arrived, and where was I? I was probably out in Asia, in Saatchi, and what people did was they'd hire one person who knew what a wireframe was, or who was able to talk about new websites without ever putting the muscle behind it to deliver work. I found it difficult to understand. People were heralding the death of the television commercial, the death of television. Hasn't happened, but what did happen is it fractured. I mean, in many ways, the big enemy to commercial television, which you represent here, is probably more Netflix than whatever that fear was back then. Give me your pattern now on it. So you set up ThinkBox. So let's just
okay. So after 13 years at PhD, ended up as chair of PhD, about to retire in my early 50s, and got a call saying, "Are you interested in setting up a thing?" Like the Internet Advertising Bureau or the Radio Advertising Bureau. I didn't see the internet and television as enemies at all. In fact, we're now at the stage where we now realise the internet might be the biggest distributor of TV to come.
It will be.
It will be when we've got good enough broadband. But at the moment, broadcasting is the best tech to get the same content to millions of people at the same time. But one day, we'd love the internet because that means you've got a two-way connection and blah-de-blah-de-blah. So I had been getting quite frustrated at the TV industry's lack of response to some of the challenges and some of the, frankly, lies that were coming from the West Coast of America about TV and wanting them to fight back. I remember sending off emails from PhD to people running ITV or Channel 4 saying, bloody hell, what are you going to say to that stupid Google thing? I think they just got bored with me telling them off and said, all right, come and do it yourself then, you think you're that good.
So did you literally have a blank sheet of paper and work out what this ThinkBox was going to be?
Well, I did very rashly resign without knowing. First of all, it wasn't even a legal entity, and so we had to sort of absolutely start from scratch, fight for a budget. So even though inviting me to come and set this thing up, I then had to go and sell it back to them. So the chief execs to say why they should give me millions of pounds to do this thing.
How did the funding work? Did you base it on a share of market?
It's quite an interesting little calculation, the levy calculation. It's a combination of your share of advertising revenue and your share of audiences. So I won't reveal any more than that. Right. But I tell you who was brilliant was Douglas MacArthur, who set up the Radio Advertising Bureau. And he, I think, early 2006, he'd just fallen out with the radio industry. And he said, but I'll tell you, what we did. Don't make it a committee. Make sure you're the chief exec. Yeah. You don't ask their permission to do things. You have KPIs that you have to meet. Otherwise, it will just go very slowly. And I see other bodies operating a committee system. It just is a nightmare.
So give me some of the myths and the I was reading your annual book out there.
Ah, right.
Why is TV not dead?
I think TV, well, obviously, partly you get into semantics then. So what we call TV, which would include Netflix. Yeah. Netflix is absolutely part of TV. Yeah. It wins TV awards. ITV make content for Netflix.
Right.
It just doesn't carry advertising. It's not linear and it's not broadcast. Although I believe, some of the subscription video on demand players are thinking about having real-time streaming, because actually people quite like sometimes to congregate around a real-time event, particularly sport.
Oscars, all that stuff.
Yeah. So the idea of having things happening real-time, which is what live TV is probably always going to be a necessary thing to offer people, but probably less than it is now. So live linear TV.
And news and stuff like that is very important.
So, in fact, it was a very interesting piece of research we got. It shows the 8 different needs people get from video, which is to connect or to relax, be part of a big event, to escape. And that's where Netflix and sort of Sunday night drama, escape into a world, or Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
Other times you want to it's this morning, you want to watch what's happening now, I can ring them. So there's, TV will fulfill different needs.
I read a very good, as a planner, I like companies that get it. So they capture what they're about in a very succinct phrase. And Netflix, apparently their enemy is sleep.
I think they've made inroads into some people's sleep.
Yeah, but this idea of launching 24 episodes in one fell swoop is great.
But funnily enough, the very early days of Sky Plus, the very first recorders that people had, I remember doing a piece of research at PhD, funnily enough, about the new habit of binging. People were already learning to record things, stack them up, and then have a massive binging weekend. So that behaviour was a latent behaviour and a latent need for people to say, I want to watch 8 hours of this weekend.
Is it unfair to say that the TV stations missed the Netflix idea, though?
The idea of offering box sets.
Well,
I think Channel 4...
Maybe a business model that wasn't so ad-reliant, that was subscription-based.
I think
that's... all of them together.
I think that's true. I think that's a fair point.
It's a very simple idea, but I can imagine for you, for example, having to manage different CEOs and different media companies, they all want their bit done.
There's no... If Netflix were to carry advertising, they would absolutely be welcome to join ThinkBox, but it's worth probably saying what we think TV advertising is versus video advertising, because you can have a video ad running on a poster at Victoria Station, but that's not... We think the reason TV advertising is powerful is because it's advertising around and in high-quality content. People want to watch the content and they relax. They're going to watch something for half an hour or an hour. They find the advertising part of the experience. They're not quickly watching a 2-minute video on social media, and the advertising is a real irritation. It's a different thing. So it's the TV programs that make it TV advertising, as opposed to video advertising, which is an escalator panel. There's going to be more and more video advertising.
There's a very good article written recently about this idea that there was a trade-off between ads and content, where when we were growing up watching television, and you have the research that shows, back to your point about The Guardian, that consumers of television always felt the ads were great and they liked them. And today that number is through the floor. People don't find the advertising stimulating or involving or engaging as much as they did back then. And that contract has been slightly broken. The other thing, the digital side of things I've written about, for example, I play Scrabble on my phone.
Oh, yeah.
After every move, they put an ad in with an X that you can knock it off after 5 seconds. I know. I always.
Basically, it forces you to subscribe. Yeah. Basically, it's using advertising as a punishment to make you upgrade. That's terrible, using advertising like that. The thing you quoted, that the people's liking of advertising as much as the programmes has gone way down, that TGI number. It's interesting to look at that, because genuinely, it's partly because people are liking the programmes more. Honestly, because they now have more choice. There are fewer compromises made. There's a one commercial channel. If you didn't like Family Fortunes, Songs of Praise, but you had to watch it, or you had to watch what your partner wanted to watch. Yeah. So genuinely, there is more enjoyment of TV programs, and that research is not just from us, from lots and lots of sources, that people find there's too much TV now to watch. Yeah. In fact, they worry that they get too obsessed with it.
First of all, your main point is that the people are still watching television in droves. They're seeing,
in different ways, though.
47 commercials a day, or whatever the number is. Yeah.
At normal speed.
At normal speed, with the sound on and not clicking an X. Yeah. So I'm working on a paper to present whoever listened to me about this idea that. So take Peter Field and Les Binet, who were two researchers who use the IPA,
the IPA data bank.
Which is an effectiveness award data bank to show that brands that use emotional advertising, that use television, that use long-term brand building rather than short-term sales-driven stuff, succeed and deliver more shareholder profit. And they've been banging this drum for 15 years. I will be getting up talking to marketeers about how it's much more important to do, work that stands out, work that's a little bit causes people to feel something and make them cry or get them angry, but anything that's just bland and nice just doesn't work and you're throwing money away. That's been a drum that's been banged for 15, 20 years. So my view is it's not as if clients haven't got the message and they don't know this, but for some reason, if you pick the top 5 advertisers in Ireland or probably here, and I showed you, here's where they spent 60% of their money, here's where they spent 30%, this particular spot. And what the spot would be tame, safe, not rocking any boats, wallpaper.
It's very challenging, isn't it? Because the evidence is there. And there are so many reasons why. One is the tenure of marketing directors. So what's the point of building brands for 5 years' time? Because you're not going to be there. So I'm going to get a short-term fix. Sometimes that's just price cutting or, bog-offs. It's not always response media. But then there has been this sort of massive internet media conspiracy is perhaps too strong a word, but I do think there's been a sort of collusion between the big tech companies and big media agencies to move money into search, to move money into clickable online banners and things like that.
The algorithm is king today. It doesn't really matter what the content is on.
Yes, the attribution. So you basically
25 times in my Scrabble.
So if you search for something and it's a paid search, then search gets the attribution of that response, as opposed to the radio ad they heard on the way to work. And then you let these tech companies do the analysis for you, which so many advertisers tell us, we've had our Google person in today, they've helped us plan. You think, are you mad? So naturally, the attribution, they might look at the whole online journey, but they don't look at the offline journey and say, it's the ad in The Guardian that made that person then search for that. So we need to take back, marketers must take control of their own attribution analysis, and it needs to be in depth, which is why when Peter Field and Les Binet do it and proper econometricians, that's why TV and other brand building media come out so strongly. But I have a slight worry about making it a binary choice. I think if you said to Boots, say, well, you can either spend your £1 million creating a short-term effect, or you can spend it by creating a long-term effect. They would go for a short-term effect every time. Because if you don't get a short-term effect,
there is no long-term.
But what all we try and say is that actually television produces the biggest short-term effect, but on top of that, you get this massive bonus. So you need both. Find creative work and media choices that will give you a short-term effect, but at the same time, build your brand equity. And at the moment, we're seeing marketing effectiveness go down, and that's because people are not taking account of the long-term effect in addition to the short-term.
And on the other issue about quality of content and emotional advertising, there's still this deep suspicion about creativity in agencies and the reason why agencies are coming at us with this work that's a bit avant-garde or different or makes me feel kind of something, and are you just doing this to win awards? Are you really caring about my brand here? And all you really have, the anchor ad that's running through this conversation that we're having of The Guardian is a great example of what you just said. Take a difficult enough concept, make it something that people can feel and tap into. There is a lot of work that was being done for good purposes, but that horse has left the stable.
The trouble with TV ads, if you like, is that even pretty average, uninspiring ads work sort of okay. And it's very hard to persuade people, let go of the average, uninspiring, that's not going to get you fired ad. Because though we have done work with the IPA to prove that ads that are creatively awarded, far from being self-indulgent, they are something like 11 to 12 times more effective pound for pound. So it's actually absolute madness not to be brave and not to take risks. It's the biggest risk you take is to not be brave. The wonderful thing is we have sort of hero people in the industry who do take risks, like Craig Ingalls of John Lewis famously. who is just utterly wedded to creativity and spends so much time inputting into that. Because although I'm a media planner by background, actually the creative element is a much bigger lever in terms of
you might get the street outside here and ask 100 people who the most creative advertiser is in Britain. They would say John Lewis.
Yeah.
And to get that high ground is mental.
From a shop that didn't even advertise on TV about 8 years ago. So that's pretty extraordinary what he's created.
Let's move on to your socialist hat now and away from advertising. Are we going to get out of this hole that we're in, not just in a Brexit sense, but what's your view on the world that you live in now?
I am absolutely traumatised by the concept that we will leave Europe. I do buy that it's brought us peace. I believe it's one big family, but equally I sort of try and understand the anger that generated the Leave vote that was, in my opinion, I'm afraid, caused by austerity. So apart from all the human misery that austerity generated, I think needlessly, it's also created this terrible rift potentially, that we're going to take ourselves out of a market that's not perfect by any means, but has delivered in great sense. And for us not to have even considered the Irish situation, it's just
we're over there
criminal. It's actually criminal.
I mean, when I was growing up, there was the vicious, I would call them vicious politicians running Britain. Thatcher's government, Tebbit, all these and they were scary.
That's when I joined the Labour Party in 1982.
And there was a pincer movement of capitalism with Reagan, breaking unions. I mean, in hindsight, I was brought up to be told unions are bad. And you look at it now, they were the only bulwark against rampant mistreatment of workers, which has happened. I read some of the top 5 employers in America in the 50s. Car companies, Ford, Chrysler, American Steel, companies that paid proper wages, with benefits, with health, with pensions. Today,
won by unions.
Won by unions. Today, they are McDonald's, Walmart, companies that you go, do you want the job or not? And if not, there's someone else in line, and you don't get any of this. My view, weirdly, is we should be looking to Scandinavia more than maybe some of the European countries to see how you can do free market with a very, very good social side to it, where, this idea that, the worst people I've met are the people who are almost self-made millionaires from poor backgrounds. Who go,
Aaron Banks, is that?
Yeah, but like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, take responsibility, do what I did. I was poor and now I'm rich, with no understanding of why we have IQ, for example. If there's someone who has 120 IQ, that means there's someone who has a 70 IQ, probably next door. Who can't do that? Who doesn't have the spoons to do that?
No, my socialism, I'm not even a socialist, I don't know. It's a pretty basic thing about empathy for other human beings. Just seeing somebody who volunteers at a food bank and, talking about the horrendous levels of distress he sees, people coming in, so ashamed, so humiliated, but they haven't got any money and haven't got any food, and they have no option but to go to food banks. How can we have created a society like that when there's an immense amount of wealth? So unions got a bad name, and of course nothing's perfect. I'm sure there are abuses. Absolutely no institution is perfect, but isn't it better to have workers' rights than not? And you can see what happens if you don't protect workers' rights. Workers do get abused. So I just can't understand why people aren't prepared to pay taxes. When my accountant says, I'm sorry, you've got to pay a cheque to to Inland Revenue, I'm really sorry. I say, that's fine. That's a school and a hospital. I need schools, hospitals, roads.
Like we have we've mortifying things in Ireland. Like 4,500 children are homeless in Ireland. 10 or 11,000.
People dying on the streets in Britain.
That just shouldn't be happening. I've got friends who would go, the only reason women get pregnant is so they can get the free money. Your comment there about someone going to a food bank, the absolute, the humble pie, or the wrong word is humble pie.
Well, humiliation. It's degradation.
The degradation of having to go and do that as if someone wants to.
Nobody wants to. No.
And who wants to sleep on the street?
No, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? So I get very frustrated by very wealthy companies saying they're obliged to maximise profits to shareholders So they have to exploit every single international tax loophole in order to pay the minimum amount of tax. I don't find that in any way admirable. And particularly if those companies then say, oh, we've set up a philanthropic institution.
I know.
Think, no, fuck off. Pay your tax first. Exactly. You can't have philanthropy until you've paid all your taxes. And only then. As I said, nothing's perfect. There's no system. I'm not an ideologue, if that's a word. I'm quite happy to compromise, but generally speaking, you know what you want the outcomes to be, and so you work back and say, oh, well, we need that law to be in place then, or we need to pay that, and bingo, really. And I'd much rather, it's very selfish, because that's the society I want to live in. It's not me being kind or anything. I just hate living in a place where I park my car and there are homeless people sleeping under the steps there.
Our approach to giving alms as well has been, it's a bit like the church. It's been, we get kind of brainwashed. I mean, parents saying to kids, don't give them any money, they'll only use it on drink and drugs. I'm kind of going, fine, if that's what they use it on. There are people, they can do it. I mean, this judgmentalism that goes on.
It's horrible, isn't it? I read a book once in my teens called Hunger by Knut Hamsun, which was just a whole novel just about being hungry. And, you know, in it he begs. So I never, ever think, I don't care whether they spend it on drugs, but in case they might want a sandwich, you know, isn't it better to let them have a sandwich?
$2
for fuck's sake.
Yeah. What about the climate thing?
Oh, well, obviously the single biggest crisis.
Well,
If you were a cockroach, you might want us to be gone. I worry tremendously about. My husband is a mad keen lepidopterist, which is a butterfly nut.
I knew that. You could have quizzed me. Right?
Oh, yes.
Damn it.
Sorry, yes, with your Irish, you're way with work.
Anyone who knows the lepidopterist. Does he have the glass cases with the pins?
Oh, God, no. He wouldn't ever kill anything.
Okay.
No.
Is that a different type of thing?
Well, I suppose it used to be like that. Now you just catch them on camera sort of thing. But so we have some fields that have been turned into meadows. But he is so concerned about numbers of not just butterflies, but all insects. Because it's all a change. You don't get enough caterpillars from the butterflies, then you won't get the birds. And then, you know, it's...
I did a podcast on this. I'll send it to you. Your husband would like it, yeah.
He would. And he often says, look, we've just done a journey at night time from here to here. There are no insects dead on our... When we were kids, our windscreen would have been covered.
Straight to the car wash.
Yeah. And where are the insects? And we can't live. Insects will survive longer than humans. Yeah. But if they go down far enough, humans are dead.
A jaundice, again, view, I may have told this podcast before, as I was over in a again, I won't mention the name. I will catch them. They were a public relations company, and I was actually on the client side to hire them. And somebody said, do you have any examples of good CSR you've done? And fair play to the head suit, flipped open the laptop and had a presentation ready to go, and it was for Häagen-Dazs about the bees, right? This is about 15 years ago. So the issue was, bees are dying. If bees die, Häagen-Dazs, which relies on vanilla from pollinated flowers, will cease to exist. Whoa. And so here's what we did. And they did a beautiful campaign about Save the Bees, which won a can, and I just cheekily put my hand up and said, so are the bees okay now?
Because they
stopped doing it, right? And they kind of, the whole room looked around at me going, don't fucking play the game here, showing what they were doing. But that's the problem I have with a lot of CSR work. The bees are still fucked. Right? I know your little ad campaign, Rose Awareness.
And when Gillette stops doing it, women are still being... For all the advice I give people about how they should invest their media expenditure and what they should do in marketing, probably more important, I should tell them to plant pollinating flowers, create corridors for insects, and don't have a new car. I mean, one of the interesting things about advertising is, does it create a false need? That's one of the moral dilemmas I think about.
Yeah. Of capitalism.
Advertising can be used as a tool of capitalism, but it could also be used as a tool of renewal, and it's entirely what you choose to do. Advertising is a brilliant way to persuade people to do things. Do you want to save the world? In which case advertising will be absolutely critical. Yeah. If we're saying you can have a new car less frequently, or it's going to be less flashy, you've got to give people probably an emotional reward because they're going to have a lower visceral reward. But they need to feel good, and advertising we'll have to do that. So we're very into advertising for good. So if you choose to use advertising for the right reasons, it will be an incredibly powerful tool. Yeah. But that will be our society's decision to do that. So ITV's lovely new ad to encourage kids to eat more vegetables, which you might have seen. Well, that's what advertising can do. If I can
what
remember.
Would you say, and I also read that when you were 16 you started in a doctor's surgery. What would you say to that, Tess Boot?
Yeah.
If you could whisper in her ear.
I'd say keep learning. Life is very long.
That sounded weary.
No, just it's a very long. Your life is going to be very, very long.
Yeah.
And the fact that you think you want to do this now, be prepared to completely change your mind, change everything, learn something new, and it's never too late. That's what I believe. It's never like when I was in my mid-50s. It's never too late to try something new. I'm trying to write a novel based on my Irish granny. Actually, you think, well, it's never too late to try.
I'm dealing with rejection letters, which is great fun.
Oh, horrid. So keep going. Try something new. If that doesn't work out, don't sit and suffer. Just move on and learn to do something different.
Well, you keep moving on and doing something different. Breath of fresh air still. Thanks for being on my show.
Thank you, Seaniebee. That was great.